Greetings, Cristo Ray Boston. Happy Wednesday, although I have no idea what day it is. I always have to look it up online. Today is a day for prayer. Today is a day for Thanksgiving. Today is also a day to be very serious and intentional in our prayers. A few members of our school community are going through personal crises and crises of health for their family members. So I just want to first and foremost let those people know that we'll be praying for them and also that they are not alone in these trying times. If anyone has any prayer intentions or anything that they would like me to pray for or the school community, I encourage you to reach out via email, messaging, anything you want, because it's important that you don't feel alone at this time and you know that we're praying with you, but that our prayers matter and our prayers have real power and efficacy. So thank you for those of you who have been praying, and know if you are someone who asks for prayers, that prayers will be taking place. Today's question is answering a student question, and the student wants to know, how is it possible for us to read the first 11 chapters of the Bible, so the first 11 books of Genesis, as allegory, or do they need to be read as literal science and history? So, to answer this question, I'm first going to open up with a quote from our Pope John Paul II, who was the Pope before Pope Bishop Emeritus Benedict XVI. He says, "The Bible itself speaks to us of the origin of the universe and its makeup, not in order to provide us with a scientific treatise, but in order to state the correct relationships of man with God and with the universe." Okay? So, with that being said, we're going to kind of talk about that, because the author of the Bible for Catholics is twofold, right? So the first author of the Bible is a human author. He or she is going to pick the words. He or she is going to pick the phrasing, the style, the form. But then we're also going to have God as author. And God's job is to make sure that the content and the message and the truth is present in the Bible. So what is God trying to do? What are the human authors trying to do? Well, these stories that we're going to be talking about, which are mostly the creation story, the 6 days of creation, then Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, what do these stories teach us? They could be teaching us the history of the world, and I'm not saying that Adam and Eve is not a true story. We've got to be very careful here. I'm not saying Adam and Eve didn't happen. I'm not saying that the world wasn't created in 6 days. What we're talking about is the stories itself. Was the intention of God and the human authors to teach us literal science and history, or was their intention to teach us about God, humanity, and our relationships together? And that's what I see, right? So when we look at the 6 days of creation, we get a really beautiful story. We get this understanding there's light, there's darkness, there's water, there's land, there's plants, there's animals, there's fish, there's birds. But what I see is not a science history. What I see is that the world was created for humans, that there are fish and fowl to eat, that there is water to sustain us, that there's light for us to live by, and nighttime for us to sleep during. That the world in and of itself was made for humans, that we are so valuable, so important that God would create a world specifically for us. The Adam and Eve story, right? You really could have a story about why human beings are no longer in heaven or in paradise, right? You really could be getting a story about why we don't belong with God, or why we're broken away from God, and why we are physically separated from Him. But I don't see that. What I see is God explaining to us that it is our selfishness, that it's our choosing our wills over God's wills that enables us to be imperfect. And because we are in a perpetual state of imperfectness, because we every single day of our lives choose ourselves over God, God needed to put us apart. He needed to set us aside. He wanted to give us a chance to choose God. So God has put us in this temporary realm, this earth, so that we can live our lives either choosing ourselves or choosing God. And at the end of that life, if you choose God, you will go to heaven. You will follow the path of His Son, Jesus. And if at the end of your life, all you've done is chosen yourself, God will give you yourself. You will spend eternity without God. So I tend to believe that the Bible, especially the first 11 chapters, are allegorical, that they are not necessarily true stories. Once again, I would never say that they are false. I would never say that you can't say they're true stories. But I just think when we look at the human authors, when we look at God, the author's intent, and when we look at the stuff that we take out from that story, that to me, I really do prefer an allegorical reading. Now, for those of you who are real nerds, in terms of church historians, okay, in the East, they do actually prefer a more literal reading. So Origen, Basil, Gregory of Nazianzus, those guys are going to have tended to have read these stories more literally. The Jewish philosopher Philo, okay, Augustine of Alexandria, Justin Martyr, these men who are more Western tended to read the story as allegory. So here's the boiling down point. You can read the story however you want. However, it's perfectly within the Catholic tradition to read these stories as truths about God, theological truths, and to not read them as science and history. Have a wonderful day. Remember that you are loved at school and you are loved by God, and you are in our prayers. Thank you.